Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome. So we've been talking mostly about how to come up with a good idea last week and how to come up with like a good sort of fleshed out version of your game idea last time we talked. Mostly this is just kind of the stages that you go through in this course when you're trying to figure out, what your game's going to look like. You spend a little time, doing the ideation, brainstorming stage to think about kind of where your idea could be. And then once you've got kind of a seed for it, you kind of see where that seed can grow and figure out, how do you enhance this idea until it feels like it's got the basis of like a good game somewhere inside it. That's where we get to the pitch. The pitch is where you take this idea, now that you've had a chance to kind of figure out, what the seed of your idea is going to be and kind of how it's going to be augmented by, various enhancements or features. And then you put it in front of people and you see what they think. So for this one, so this coming Tuesday is going to be the first one. We're going to do 4 teams presenting on the Tuesday, 4 teams presenting on the Friday. And we get different sets of guest judges coming for each of them. So you're welcome to, no matter what section you're assigned to, you're welcome to come to both to see what the other teams are doing and also to meet some of these guests. This coming Tuesday, we're going to have, so Adam Robinson, the guy who made A Short Hike, he's going to be there. Emma Burkett, she was one of the people who worked on the Pitfall Planet game that won, the best award at Level Up. She's going to be there too. And it's possible that we're going to have either Bryn Davies from Ubisoft or Jamie Wu, who is the leader of this organization called Gamer Camp, which is kind of like a TIFF for games. He was running that for about 10 years and has since gone to work for Riot Games, and he'll either be there on the Tuesday or the Friday. We're still figuring that out. Either way, we're going to have quite a lineup. And so what happens is that each of you is going to have like a short period to be able to pitch your games, and then your guest panel will give their feedback. They'll do certain suggestions on things that they think will work and things that they won't, things that they think you should really stay away from, and also other games that you should go take a look at in order to kind of figure out, what your mechanics is going to look like or how other people have done games like this. Okay. So that's going to be what happens. In terms of the games that we're doing, you should have received an email about this or an announcement from Quirkus saying that these are the 8 games that we're going to run with for this semester. They're pretty much all over the place, but there were a lot that were actually really great. Like, what's one that comes to mind? the hot and cold game. That one was really, like, it was basically like a 2-button game. Like, you're trying to get your character to go towards a goal, and you have only the ability to tell them like hot and cold. And I think that something's chasing you at the same time. Like, I can't remember the exact details, but the idea of having something where all you can say is hot and cold, and you're just trying to get this character to go the right direction was cool. We just, like, it was just one of those things where, like, you're one person on the CS team would have had stuff to do, and then the other people probably wouldn't. And so it was just like, oh, this would be a great game for someone to do like on their own, but maybe not something where you've got like a whole team to kind of, a whole team of people to be able to throw at it. So each of these was considered to be scoped well in terms of it's probably doable within the time we've got. It has potential to be interesting, for multiple people on each campus to work on. And it's like there's some things in there that people haven't really seen before. And so being able to explore that and show people kind of what a game like this would be about would be pretty interesting. Anyway, so this is something where we emailed you about this. What you need to do, if you're not one of these 8 people, is you need to fill out the form we provide to say, okay, out of these 8 games, which ones would you like to work on? We're going to do like a group forming activity tomorrow evening. And we need to know which ones you prefer so that as we go around assigning people, we can take your preferences and your skills into account. Okay, so that's kind of what we're asking you to do. By the end of tonight, please submit this. If you don't, then we'll just assign you wherever we need to fill a space. Okay. Yeah, so yeah, this will be interesting. And just so you know, also, these are the pictures, or these were the descriptions that were submitted to us. We have also sent our feedback to these 8 people, just to let them know that what was sent here isn't necessarily what the final game is going to look like. There are some things that we thought were good and worth keeping, and some things that we thought you should probably get rid of. So don't take a look at this and say, this is exactly what the game's going to be. This is the starting point. This is kind of like the idea that we thought had some potential if you lop off some parts and really develop some other parts. But there is some potential in these areas based on what we've seen in the past. Okay, so let's talk about this pitch. All right, I don't want to assume that everyone knows what a pitch is or has done a course where you've had to do an elevator pitch of some sort. So I do want to make sure that I kind of cover these things, more or less from the beginning, just to be safe, just for the sake of being thorough. So when they talk about an elevator pitch is so named because it's supposed to be something that you can convey to like the CTO of your company while you're riding up the elevator to go up to whatever floor your office is on, right? Not so great if you're on the 6th floor, but if you're working downtown, then yeah. So understandably, it's meant to be quick. It's meant to be that you've got this person's attention for maybe 30 seconds or a minute. And you have to be able to say enough about what you're doing to be able to get their attention and make them want to hear more, so that when the elevator doors open, they don't just walk away. They want you to come with them and tell them more about this so that they can figure out if there's something worth investing in by the time they get to their actual office. I have to do this all the time, like all the time. And this is because, especially when it came to organizing the Level Up event, I was interacting with a lot of people from industry, and you'd be meeting people just anywhere. You don't know when. Suddenly someone introduces you and says, oh, this is the person who's the head of a studio. Steve, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself? And I have to be able to, at a moment's notice, say like a 30-second blurb about who I am and what I do in a way that's meant to catch their interest and make them think like, oh, actually, yeah, I want to keep talking to this person. And that pitch has to vary itself depending on who I'm talking to. Am I talking to somebody from the government? Am I talking to somebody who's the head of a company? Am I talking to somebody who is like someone who works in like HR and recruiting versus someone who's like the tech head of a company? I have to be able to spin the things that we do in this class in different ways, depending on what my audience is. So this is a skill that, with enough practice, it becomes second nature. But because a lot of you are starting this for the first time and have not had to do something like this, sell the work that you're doing, we need to talk about what this is going to look like. Anyway, yeah, so there's no really great way of being able to teach you this stuff, but we're going to try. Let us start off with what you have to hand in at this stage. So what you're going to be doing is that next week, you're going to either be assigned to present on Tuesday or on Friday. And whatever day you have, we're going to do like a 5-minute pitch for 4 groups on each day, followed by about 15 minutes worth of questions or comments from our guest panel. This will be the shortest out of all the presentations you do. The design is going to definitely be a lot longer because you're going to have to present a lot more fleshed out stuff like character design, level progression, that kind of stuff. This is just trying to communicate the idea and give you some practice with being able to talk to people, share stuff on Discord, all that stuff, right? So what you need to do is you're going to be preparing a presentation, usually like a handful of slides that goes over like the general idea of your game. At the end, you're going to submit those in the form of a creative brief. It's basically just describing what you've gotten plus what feedback you've received in order to say like, yeah, this is kind of my summary of what my game is going to be about. It's nothing big, like maybe a page or so, as long as it covers all the things that your presentation covered, plus some of the things you're going to modify thanks to the feedback you've gotten. So you submit that creative brief on the itch.io page. The itch.io page is something that you need to create in preparation for this. We've shown you kind of examples of this, like the itch page for Short Hike we've shown. You just basically need to make your own. And this is not something that's going to be fully fleshed out by this milestone. We just need to know that it exists. It has the creative brief on it, and it has some basic descriptions of your game. You send that link to Karthik, and we basically look at these things, and this is where we're going to keep checking for all of your deliverables for the course. So when you hand in your design document, it'll be one of the things you post on your itch page. When you've got like your starting playable prototype, you have like either a video link or like a playable link on the itch page. Itch is a great way for people to be able to share documents, videos, and basic like gameplay demos. So this is the stage where you make it, because it's the first thing that you have to hand in for the course. Please put any questions you have in the chat, right? We're just kind of, this is kind of where we're starting off. So all this is going to be due at the end of next week, right? So some people present on Tuesday, they can do the modifications, submit this thing early. People who are presenting on the Friday basically have to like less time to make modifications to their work before they have to submit it. What is the actual pitch presentation like? Okay, is the chat not loading? Yeah, no one seems to be talking on the chat that much. So, I mean, Max was the last person that I saw who put something on there. All right, pitch presentations. So what it's actually like is short, right? A few minutes where you talk about your game. Probably you introduce the people who are on your team, or at least the ones that you have so far. Once your pitch is done, also, we'll talk a little bit about that in a sec, but yeah, you put who's on the team, who's doing what stuff. And then you go in to say, okay, what your game is about. And you can assume that your audience is at least familiar with games enough that you could probably make reference to some of the bigger ones and not have to worry about whether it's lost on people. But otherwise, you're trying to use like words and visuals to try to convey the feeling that your game is trying to evoke, right? And this is a good time when images can help say like 1,000 words. So if you want this game to be, very dreamy, very ethereal, bring up some images of other games that have sort of a similar feel to them and have those reinforce the kind of things you're trying to actually say in your presentation. People are going to be taking in as much with their eyes as they are with their ears. And so what you're going to do is give them something that they can hear and see and integrate those two things together to create like a single full picture, right? So the idea of creating a bunch of images that convey your meaning is what's called a mood board. The people from OCAD are very good at this because this is a lot of what they've had practice with. They've also had practice with delivering these kinds of presentations and doing these kinds of critiques. So once they join us at the end of next week, that's when you'll have a chance to kind of gain their expertise as well. But all of you have to do this. You have to at least know how to be able to present the ideas behind your game, because you're going to be doing it like 5 or 6 times throughout the term. It is cool and encouraged to compare what your game is like to others. No one's expecting you to make something that is completely innovative, that doesn't connect to anything else. Wherever you can connect it to existing games, that helps save you the time of describing it, right? It's like having to imagine trying to describe like a platformer without being able to use the word platformer. It just would, you could be able to do it. It's just, it would take so much time that it would be almost not worth the effort. Use existing games, use genre terms to be able to describe your games so that you don't have to spend all of your time defining something that people already recognize. And the big thing also is you really need to convey what makes your game different. So you compare it to other games to be able to say, it's kind of like this game, kind of like this game, but what's making ours different is we are doing this thing, because that's the thing that your audience is going to be focusing on. Not only because that's what they're most interested in, but they're also going to be using that to be the thing that they give critiques on, right? If you're going to try to make a game where it's like an endless runner that you run backwards the entire time, they're going to focus on that to say, like, what would happen if you made an endless runner where you're running backwards? And then they're going to use that to help give you feedback on, if you're going to do this, you're going to have to be careful about making sure that you can see enough of what's going on behind you to be able to avoid obstacles. And if you're going to do this, you're going to make sure that your character is suitably interesting from behind, like things like that. They're going to want to focus on the thing that makes your game unique and interesting so that they can tell you what things are potentially going to be little pitfalls in the future and help you try to avoid them. All right. Without prescribing these things too much, this is generally what people tend to do. They have like one slide that introduces the name of their game and the members of their team. That's kind of where they start while they're doing the basic hello, how are you doing? And then they have at least one slide where it just describes what the main elements of the game are. At least one slide that shows like, okay, you know, this is kind of the description. Here's some images that can kind of help feed your imagination a little bit to help you picture what we're picturing. And then something that helps to get into like what's cool and unique. People, like, it's not like you have to do exactly 4 slides and it has to be this way. What we found is that when we didn't provide any kind of guidance, people went all over the place, right? People would do this without describing what made their game unique. People would do this entirely with text and no images. And there's just always something lacking about this when you don't give people something to picture in addition to something to hear. When you don't talk about what makes your game cool, and it makes it just seem like your game is just another first-person shooter. So this is just to help those of you who didn't already have an idea as to how a pitch should go, just understand to make sure you're not missing the major things that the audience is going to be looking for.
Steve.
Yep.
Hey, for this point, should we do like concept designs or things like that, or is that too early? I don't know.
I mean, so what people in other semesters, what people would have done is that they would have done the second game jam by the time they go into their pitch, right? Because the second game jam would have happened this coming weekend if we had both campuses together. But what we're actually like, so some people would do it just because it would help them figure out what this is going to look like and it would help them convey it. If you have the time and the expertise to be able to put something like that together, then it can only help, right? Some people would actually take some of what they jammed over the weekend in the second game jam and actually present a little footage from that to help people see like this is kind of the mechanic that we're looking for. So basically, yeah, there's nothing that says if you've got it, hold on to it until the next demo. If you've got it, then show it, right?
And then for this, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Yep.
For the second game jam, we're going to be doing it in the same teams that we'd be working with for the entire course, right?
Yes. So the second game jam is going to be fun because it's going to be these teams that you form, or that we're going to be forming tomorrow. And you're going to be jamming with that team, and we're going to toss in all the new OCAD people and then see how that goes. Because you've had one chance to jam together as a bunch of, CS and music people. And you're going to use that in order to try to create sort of the underlying framework of how this is going to look structurally. And then you jam again with a bunch of people producing and contributing art and see how that goes and use that to inform what your design is going to look like. The second game jam is supposed to help you understand the capabilities of your art teams so that your game is going to have to pivot to respond to what kind of artists you've got access to. And so that's what the game jam number 2 is for, to help you understand each other and then figure out where your game's going to go in order to take advantage of the skills you got. It's going to be fun. I think it'll be fun. It may be like a tricky experience for you folks, but we're going to enjoy it. Any other questions that anyone has about kind of what things go into the pitch? Yeah. All right. Here's some of the things that we've seen in the past that have kind of made these pitches not go so well. Things where like I'm silently screaming in my head, like, oh my God, why is there so much text on this screen? And yeah, like we've been doing this for a while. Like the first time I taught this course was like 2007, I guess. And back then, we were like, oh yeah, we need to do a pitch. And we saw some of the pitches, we're like, oh man, okay, next year I need to tell people not to do this thing. And so we just kind of accumulate these things over the years. What things have we seen people do that we're like, all right, next year we're going to make sure nothing happens like this. So here's some of the things. Too much text, right? Some people will just fill up the whole thing with text and then you're just spending the whole time reading and not listening to what the person's saying. You want the text to only just kind of enhance what the person's talking about, or give you as a speaker a chance to like remember what the major things you want to cover are. That kind of touches into number 3. There are people who will just spend the entire time staring at their own slides on the projector and reading from them. You should be able to pitch your game without the slides at all. The slides are just there for people to visually have something that latches them on to the words you're saying. Um, but instead do it in the team forming process one more time, but instead doing it in one day. Okay, well, we'll talk about some of the like, let me finish this stuff first, and then we'll talk about some of the team forming process afterwards. So let's see. The nervous rambling. So there's people who they can't have empty space without feeling like they need to fill it. So they'll say the point that they have. And then because they feel like they need to say more, they'll say the exact same point again in some other form. And it's difficult because you want to kind of move on. And the need to fill the empty air with something, it can be compelling when you're up there. But you have to be able to fight it. Just say exactly what needs to be said and then move on. Yeah, so the reading from the slides, try to avoid spending too long on one slide. This happens when people take 4 slides and they divide them among 4 people. And one person will just go on and on because they just want to have like a chance to say everything that they want to think of. And they don't want to give up the stage until they feel like they have covered everything. You really need to kind of say, how many sentences am I going to give myself? I'm going to talk a little bit about this, but I need to give myself like a 1 or 2 minute limit just to make sure that I'm not eating into the next person's time. Right. So sometimes what people do is they'll say like one person is going to do this presentation, someone else is going to do the next one, someone else will do the next. So that one person kind of has a sense of pacing for the entire presentation. But when you split it up amongst multiple people, each individual person may not have a concept of how much time they're taking relative to the others, right? Because they just want to get through, they want to make sure that they're thorough about what they want to say. This gets to the idea of coordination. Like if you know that there's different areas where people have different levels of expertise, and so you're like, okay, you're going to talk about the character design, you'll talk about the level design, and I'll talk about the kind of overall gameplay arc. If you don't make it very clear, like I'm going to take over on this slide, I'll cover slide 1, you cover slide 2. If that's kind of left up in the air, then there's going to be moments where it's like, do you want to talk? Are we going to talk about this? And you don't want to be trying to coordinate that while you're in the middle of your presentation. And the backstory thing. Some people love to tell this huge winding story about the characters, like hopes and dreams. Whereas right now, we're mostly interested in like, what is this game going to be about? Your backstory is going to change as your game changes, and probably it's going to be the last thing that you come up with. So while you might have fun and it's easy to come up with a backstory, don't make that the big thing. Like, do your pitch. If you have time at the end, talk about the backstory, but realize that's probably not even going to be the thing. That's probably going to be the first thing that changes as your game updates itself. So we have seen slides like this. Like the first, no, maybe the second year that I was teaching this, I got a slide like this, and I was just looking at it, and it hurt me just looking at it because there was stuff, yeah, okay, things were spelled badly. There was, giant bits of text that were impossible to read. There were like random memes that were thrown in. Really, what you want to try to do is communicate effectively. And while fun slides are, naturally fun, they should be fun because your game is fun, not because you put something in like some artifact that helps make the slides kind of, like amusing but distracting. Don't distract away from your game. Make sure that if there is something fun that people smile or laugh about, it's because you presented your game and your game is funny. But try to avoid this kind of thing, right? So let's see. So getting feedback. So this is actually one of the major reasons why we do these presentations, because we need you to get feedback. We can't be the ones giving you feedback on your games throughout this course. Otherwise, you're going to be making a course for, Mason, Emma, and Steve, and to a certain degree, Bryn and Karthik. But it's not meant to be a game for us any more than it's meant to be a game for you. It's meant to be a game for other people. So this is why we bring in a rotating group of panelists so that no one person helps you over-tune your game to a specific type of player, but you're going to be able to get opinions from all across the game industry to be able to figure out what kind of things your game needs to consider. So that someone might actually completely forget an aspect of your game where you really should have gotten feedback earlier. Hopefully, by the time you get different stages of feedback, you'll have like a full picture of what's good and bad about your game. And this is why we encourage you to come to the other presentation. Because if you can come, like if you're assigned to the present on Tuesday, but you can come to the Friday one, come and listen, right? Hear what kind of things are being said, so that, if someone didn't say something about your game, but you realize they said it about someone else's and it actually is relevant to yours too, you can only benefit from hearing what kind of feedback people give, because they may not be able to give you all the feedback they want. Some of what is said about other games can also apply to you. And one of the things we're going to get you to do is we're going to ask everybody to provide feedback for the game that came immediately before them, so that when you're done, before your game is supposed to be presented, you have to be there to be able to give feedback on the previous team, and then those opinions are included along with the industry guests. You can't present every part of your game, so make sure you focus on the things that are most important. And be gracious. Again, this is something that your OCAD colleagues are going to be incredibly good at, because they've had years of this, where they've had to be able to create designs, put it in front of people, get critiques, and just be able to absorb them and integrate those comments into their work. We as well, if I'm speaking to the computer scientists in the room, we are not as well practiced in this, right? We have developed more of a sense of being right than, being humble. So one of the things we're going to ask you to do is to practice saying things like, thank you, that's very helpful. I appreciate what you're telling me here. Even if you completely disagree with what they're saying, it's going to be one of those things that we're just going to ask you to practice, appreciating people as they are completely critiquing your game. And this is going to be really hard, because for some of you, like, this game is like your baby, and this is like someone coming to you and telling you that your baby is ugly, and you have to be able to take that, right? Well, yeah, it's funny. Arya is saying, like, it's said that we need training. We've already done this training before, Arya and I, so he knows that we've talked about this before. But it's more like there are people who will go up, and when they get kind of critiqued on their game, they cannot help but debate it, right? It was like people are going to say, well, that's not kind of what we had, or if I can respond to that. And we will maybe allow you to say that like once, but if you start saying it again, we're going to be like, no, just take the criticism and try to figure out what they're trying to say, and realize it's not personal. Like, they're not criticizing you, they're just trying to make your game better in ways that you may not completely have time to absorb. So do not respond to like your first instinct, which is sometimes to defend yourself against the decisions that you made, right? This is one of those things we just ask you. Yeah, I know, right? Even if you think they're wrong, you can just be like, okay, they're going to walk out of that room and you're never going to see them again, right? So there's no point in making them feel like, yeah, I was right. You basically just like, okay, let's look at what they said, and afterwards say like, is any of what they said like useful, or is there something that was like missing? Is there something that I need to follow up on? Like, how do I verify that they are wrong, right? And so this is where things like playtesting and prototyping come in. Is I need to be able to check myself, just to make sure I see that what they're saying, it came from like a place of constructive criticism, but it was missing some things. But I can't just say that they're wrong without proving it to myself, right? You need to basically say like, there's possibly an ounce of truth in what they're saying. If not, one of the other judges will contradict them, right? As opposed to you. Yep. One other thing, make sure someone takes notes. It often happens where people are up there and they're just like, get me through this presentation, get me done with this presentation, get me through this presentation. And at the end, they're like, whew, that was done. Did anyone remember what anyone said? And no one thought to actually take any notes. And so now all this critique was just kind of people nodding and saying, thank you, but without actually remembering what was actually said. Can we record the Zoom? People haven't in the past. So usually we just have somebody who takes notes just to remind yourself what people said. But I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's any issues with recording it. I'm gonna have to find out. I think we might need to get permission if we do, because we can then record it, but then, yeah, we have to get permission because I know with other things, if we have guests come in, they have to give permission before we can do any kind of recordings. All right, well, anyway, we'll see. I mean, I'm sure that our first guests won't mind too much, but just try to take notes. Well, is that it? Yeah, and sometimes you don't have to have everything figured out. Sometimes what people do is like within a group, they're like, we can't decide on the best way of approaching this particular design decision, right? Like we've been discussing it, but you know, it comes down to like these two people feel one thing, these two people feel another, and we can't resolve it. And so you can bring that to these presentations and say, we have a question for the guests. We can't decide which of these two things is better. And then the guests will weigh in, they'll be like, this one's better, right? And then you can go away feeling like, okay, well, that settles that, right? You know, having this independent arbitrator can help resolve any of these kinds of, you know, infighting in a team by just making someone else who's been doing this for a long time help resolve, you know, what is the right solution. So your brief itself, basically, it's just supposed to summarize what you put in your pitch. So it's meant to be short. It's meant to, again, do the things where it's just got a bit of description of what your game's about. It's got the names of your teammates on it, and it has some images in it to help people visualize what's going on. Imagine that, you know, if people couldn't attend your presentation, you could read your brief and get the basic gist of whatever would have come up in your presentation as well. Like, so responding to some of the questions, you know, about do you bring in, you know, these like level designs and stuff, like if you've got a couple, sure, but it's not meant to be like the main crux of what you do. It can just help give people a glimpse of what you had in mind if that's not coming through in like the words or images you provided. The itch page. So again, yeah, it creates the itch.io page. They're free. Send us a link, and then we'll just collect these things. And every time there's a milestone due, we'll go and check it. So the first thing that will be due will be at the end of next week. Karthik will check sometime over the weekend to see whether the creative brief is there and whether it more or less matches what you did in your presentation. All right. We're also asking you to create kind of what's called a devlog. This devlog is something where it's worth 10%, basically one per week for the course, just something where you're saying what you did this week and kind of showing incremental progress. This is just something that people do. It's like having a weekly stand-up. We seriously encourage you to have like a weekly meeting set in your schedules where you always meet as a group, because otherwise, you know, you're going to be just fumbling to get everything done in the day before the presentation. Having something where there's some regular interval to check in, and this is part of it, you know, is just helpful for your development, right? And we'll be talking about that stuff later too. But the devlog is part of your itch page to help show week 1, this is what we did, week 2, this is what we did, week 3, this is what we did. And, you know, if it looks like it's a little bit light, then we'll follow up to say, like, what's going on? You're going to be falling behind if you don't get a chance to do some incremental progress. So this is just something that developers do in general, right? Every game, especially indie games that, you know, need community involvement and buy-in, start off with an itch page to be able to say what kind of game they're making, where this is going. Every time there's something to show, they put it there, and it whets people's appetite. I mean, in this course, it's also for we're using it as a way of making sure that your development kind of follows this arc by sort of making it clear what things people would typically post and having you make sure you post those things as well. But you know, like any of these things, there is always a development log, you know, where it kind of shows how the development of your game is progressing and what new features have been added at each stage, so that we can see that this thing is maintaining some sort of constant progress instead of being bursty. Bursty is never good. And when we talk about project management, we'll be talking about that stuff too. Even if what you're going to admit is that little progress was made, like, don't feel like, well, we didn't make very much progress, so we're too ashamed to say what we did, so we're not going to write anything. That's not good either. All right, so this is what you need to do. We're going to be forming the groups tomorrow, once we get everybody's input as to what kind of, which team do you want to be on. You'll go with, your presentations next week as your U of T only team, except in the case of the one team where the team lead is actually from OCAD. And then, we'll just come together with a little plan of how you're going to present this thing. Because now that we've picked out the games and we've given our feedback, we want to make sure we get industry feedback right away before you move on to the next stage. So we'll be doing your presentations next week. OCAD people will actually be watching these things too, because as of at the end of next week, when the OCAD people are here, they'll have seen all these games, and then they'll have a chance to say which games they want to be part of. So the presentations are actually going to serve double duty, partly to get industry feedback to find out what things you need to change, and partly as almost like a sales job for the OCAD people, so that you can get people who are really interested in your idea to come and join your team. So that's going to be the other purpose of next week's presentations. Then by next week, or by next weekend, we'll have the OCAD people who will now be part of your team, and you will work on the things like character designs and level designs together, right? So they'll be producing or contributing some of those visual aesthetic aspects, while you contribute, like you being the U of T CS and music people, contribute some of the other assets that are going to go into this game. Okay, so this is kind of the plan, and this is part of the reason why we have it staged like this, so that the presentations come right away next week, and we use that to help the OCAD people understand what games they're going to be focusing on, and then that's going to help inform the group forming process with them involved too, so that by this time 2 weeks from now, you'll basically have your full team, and you'll be thinking about putting together character designs and level designs and all those things that need to go into your final brief, or sorry, in your design document. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm doing a lot of talking about what a pitch can be like. Let me pitch a game for you, okay? All right, so again, when I'm doing this, I got this game idea in my mind, and I've thought about it enough and I've fleshed it enough that I feel like I'm playing it in my head, and I just need to be able to convey this idea to you, right? It's not that I haven't thought about everything. I've thought about everything. I just need to make sure, all right, how do I make sure that I've thought about everything, and that I can kind of help build this world for you in the time that I've given for my pitch, right? So I need to have this thing thoroughly fleshed out in my head, so that if I don't manage to cover something in my pitch, and that's completely fine and expected, then my audience will ask me questions that will help fill in those gaps, right? So don't feel like, oh my God, I totally screwed up. I forgot to mention this part of my mechanism. It's fine, right? You talk about what you know, and the audience will fill in whatever gaps you have. So don't feel like if I don't mention every single thing, then I failed, right? This is an interaction. It's a conversation. All right, so my game idea is called Bowling Golf. Hi, my name is Steve Engels, and this is Bowling Golf. The team members here are me on gameplay, me on UI and controls, me on 3D models, me on animation, and me on technical art. So the idea of Bowling Golf is that I wanted to merge together the sports of bowling and mini golf. I love bowling, but I feel like it's the exact same thing every single time. You're just throwing this ball and you're always aiming at the exact same targets. Wouldn't it be nice if we could take these kind of bowling games, but put it on a course, so that you actually had to navigate your way through obstacles in order to get to the end goal? So this is where Bowling Golf came in. We're going to be able to do this on a mobile device. We'll have 9 or 18 holes, and there'll be a flag we need to get to, and we have to roll this ball in a controlled way to make it go through this mini golf course. So the inspiration I'm taking from this is from a few things. Connect Bowling is sort of the main inspiration from the bowling mechanic in terms of how it handles the balls and the physics, and what kind of feedback it gives in terms of the way that the balls move. Using skee ball in terms of getting that kind of the physics handling of the balls going through these courses and how they'll launch themselves in the air. Looking at things like 3D Mini Golf Unlimited for courses and how the camera is going to follow the ball through the course, and things like Gummy Bears Mini Golf for some of the more cartoonish aspects of like the character design and the little feedback that the game gives. So in terms of how this works, I'm just going to be using a mobile device to pull back to in order to control the power and the direction as well that this is going to go. I'm going to have the body English so that if I want to be able to like have it tilt or something, I can actually tilt the mobile device, so that it'll curve a little bit more. If I need to add more spin, then that's how I'm going to put that on. And each of the levels is going to be like a series of holes that are in different environments, like jungle, outer space, ancient ruins, a whole series of these things. That's my pitch. Thank you very much. I'd be very happy to hear what the audience has to say. And that's how you end it, right? That was maybe what, 4 minutes? Less? But that's the whole idea, right? After doing this, it's not like you have the exact sense of what every level is going to be like, but I've painted enough of a picture that you could take this and you could be like, yeah, okay, I see how I could do this. Maybe I would do it a little bit differently. Maybe I would put these things in. But otherwise, like, I get it, right? Mini golf meets bowling. Neat. And so this is the idea, right? You're going to want to do things that keep it short because you want to have people get the basic sense of it. And then the rest of the conversation should be kind of in their own heads, right? They don't want to be, while they're thinking about this and really like playing with it, like, like it's like taking a sip of wine and like, having it play around in your mouth. They want to have a chance to actually absorb this before you start like, you're giving them more stuff. Well, keep things short, right? So that they can absorb this thing and then they can think about it and they can toss out ideas. And, maybe some of these ideas are ones you thought of, but anyway, more ideas are never bad. Describing the key parts of your game, right? Like, it's, as much as I try to, I could go into great detail. I just said it's like bowling on mini golf courses. A little backstory, what do I need to say about this, right? The slides help because while I'm talking about it, you can see some of the images from the games I'm referencing so that you can understand when I talk about cartoonish things, you see this image from like Gummy Bears Mini Golf, and it's like, okay, I get what you're talking about, or I know that kind of genre. Yeah, more pictures, less talking. And yeah, deciding who's going to present what. And what else? Recording the feedback, right? So at this point, one of my team members would hopefully, like, one person would be there kind of like answering questions or, like just like fielding questions and saying, oh, that's great. Thank you very much. What do you think about this? Right? Encouraging them to say more as opposed to trying to shut them down, right? And then somebody else will be on the side just taking notes about these things so that afterwards as a team you can look over these notes and say, so this is what the feedback we received was. What do we want to act on, right? Like, what do we need to explore? What are we content with accepting as a fail, as like a flaw in our game or something that we're not quite going to handle? And what things do we actually feel like, oh, that was a good idea, we should really embrace this, right? So this is your pitch. This is what you're going to be doing next week. Questions about this, right? This is going to be like the first of many presentations you're going to do. So on topic of not having too much text, the game features, oh yeah, this is a little bit much. I wasn't even looking at it, right? I was mostly just talking about like using this to help say what it was I was going to be on. This is about as dense as I would put. And if you've taken any of my courses before, I don't tend to put more than this kind of description, right? If I was to do this better, I would say, like, I would take like one line and highlight it in yellow so that people can just like see those, like the main thesis line for those things and just understand, like, body English is controlled by tilting the device. Environments would include, and the last one you can't really do much, but I'd probably shorten the first one a little bit more if I could, right? Yep. Other questions? Yep. You know what? This will be good. We'll have a chance to like if you have any questions and stuff, you can always, send us questions before next week's presentations. But otherwise, the next thing to look forward to is we'll be letting you know as soon as we've done forming the groups, what these groups are, and hopefully your team leads will be in touch. If not by tomorrow night, then by sometime over the weekend. All right, that's it for me today. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and, try to keep warm. All right, talk to you all later.